I watched
Nice.
all three of them back to back, crying my eyes out. For some reason, it just hit me, and I had no clue why I was crying. And I was like, bro, whatever these people are doing, this is what I want to do. So this lady, she came up, she had cataracts. Apparently, her eyes were like kind of like the movies where you see
Where
the
they're
white
white.
over. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
glazed over.
exactly. I thought she was blind or something. And I think it's at that point where I realized, like, bro, she's seeing her child's face for the first time.
Yeah.
And it just hit me so hard, man. And as you got that wired earphones.
Yeah. Yep. Dude, I've learned too much to use wireless.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You're like, nah, Bluetooth, not for me.
Yep, yep. I'm downgrading on my technology stuff.
Nice, dude.
I mean, I'm working on it. I was gonna go I actually tried to go the flip phone route. The flip phone wasn't
Oh yeah,
working
yeah,
for me.
yeah.
Like it
That
wasn't,
sucks, dude.
I wasn't getting text messages, but literally the day that I set it up, I was like, oh, I need to look something up. Crap, I don't have
Oh, I
internet.
can't. So you're like, oh
So,
god,
but I
it's the
did get an
worst.
iPod. So the plan at the
Oh, you
moment
did?
is,
Damn, dude.
Emma's dad had one laying around that they gave me for
No
Christmas.
freaking way.
Yeah,
Which
dude.
one? Which was it? The classic?
It's, let me grab it. I'm trying to remember
Yeah,
exactly which one it
that's a
is.
great idea.
I'm not sure if it's this one,
Oh yeah,
whichever one
yeah.
this one
Same,
is.
exact same one as mine,
Yeah. So I'm gonna get it set up. I'll probably use it for mostly podcasts until I get music downloaded and stuff, and then I'll
bro.
have it on me for that more often, and then I'll set this, especially at work, off into my bag, out of the way. I'll only use
Dude,
it to clock in and clock out.
it's great for stuff like that, man.
hmm
So, is it the 160 gig that you have there?
I think so. It's got a massive.
You can see it on the back. It should
Oh
have a
yeah.
little thing that says
Yep.
160.
160.
Yeah,
Yeah, dude. So,
that's the holy grail of iPods right
is
there.
it? Is it? We
That's
were
so
talking about
good,
that
dude.
before. That's awesome.
Oh, it's it's a dream, man. It still works. Since
hmm
2007, it just keeps going, dude. It's boss, dude.
Downgrading technology, kind of get this thing out of my face all the time.
I get it, man.
hmm It's too addictive.
Oh, it's
Anyway, with that in
so
mind,
addictive. So
uh,
addictive, dude.
what's up, internet? Welcome to the
Hey.
Fringe Faith podcast. Why did I say it that way? Welcome to the Fringe Faith podcast. My name's
Yeah.
Thomas, and this is with me, my friend Anthony.
Hey, hey.
Anthony Truter. You also have a podcast. What's the name of it
Yep.
again?
It's called The Honest Podcast.
Yeah, so you've released what, one episode?
One episode soon will be the second one with my wife.
Beautiful. You still got to record it, or are you just going through the editing process?
Oh no, haven't recorded yet. Just moved into a new house, so
Oh, that's right.
oh gosh, the amount of logistics and stuff,
Uh-huh.
it's off the charts, man.
Well, you guys just bought that house, right?
Yeah, like less than a month ago.
Let's see. You guys were out here in Redding, California for 3 years,
Three
right?
years. Yep.
Yep. You knew my wife really well, and then you and I hit it off really well once I moved out here.
Yeah, dude.
And we talked about all sorts of stuff, whether it be about God or
Everything.
conspiracy or
Yeah.
everything.
Conspiracy theories. Oh
hmm
yeah. That's the name of the game right there, man.
Yeah,
I
dude.
love it.
And then yeah, we just hit it off. And then you guys, did you say you felt called or just it made sense to move out to North Carolina?
North
North, right?
Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. Oh, South Carolina. It
South.
kind of it just happened because the last year of BSSM at Bethel, the school, the third year, we one of our guys on the team was from South Carolina, Abbeville. So we did a trip down here to kind of bless his family and prophesy over his people. And I was just driving through the city. It felt a lot like Austin. And we stayed in Austin for 6 years.
Oh, that's right.
And it was kind of like the conservative Austin. So we kind of spoke about it for a little bit. My wife had a connection up here, a guy starting a new coffee shop, and she was just like, "Hey, man, have you thought of Greenville?" And I haven't, but it was kind of one of those moments where we just said, "Screw it, let's just do it."
Yeah. Well,
And
because you had a couple places on the table, didn't you?
yeah, it was California, and we had a job lined up in Houston, a worship leader position, or we were in talks of having that happen.
Hmm.
So when we kind of put out a fleece on the internet on Facebook, in 10 minutes, I had a job and we were already starting to look for a place to stay. So it was kind of
That's
one of those
awesome.
things you just stumbled upon the process and it just happened.
Yeah.
And now we're here, man.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So you had a rental for a little bit, and then you guys got a hold of a house pretty fast, honestly. It's only
Pretty
been
quick.
a handful of
It's
months
been
since you,
it's been 3 months.
geez,
Yeah.
that is fast. And you just moved in,
It's
huh?
yeah, just moved in. So it's what
Beautiful.
was like 2.5 months. We were already closing and yeah, it was wild, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Things just happened so quickly, so easily, but in the process it didn't feel easy. It
Hmm.
felt stressful, but
Yeah,
dang, am I glad to be on the other side
that's
of
fantastic,
that.
man.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's kind of backtrack a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your testimony and kind of how you came to faith and eventually to America, because you're not even originally an American. So let's
No,
let's
sir.
let's talk a little bit about that. You started off over in good old South Africa.
South Africa. Yes, sir. Well, do you want to specifically hear about how I got saved?
Sure, let's start
Or,
there because you didn't grow up in the church. You were an atheist and or
yeah,
agnostic or one of the two. I don't know, but
right.
yeah, man, what was that process?
Well, I technically I grew up in the church, was always there, but nothing made sense to me. I was
Okay.
always very skeptical guy. I was kind of like, for those who don't read the Bible, Thomas
Mm,
in the Bible was super skeptical. He had to see everything to believe it, and I felt like I was kind of that dude. Family life was pretty much in shambles, so we we were kind of living one life, like keeping up with the Joneses or Johnsons or Joneses or whatever you call that
yep, yep,
in
yep.
America. um, but going to church, living that perfect life, and then when you go home, the house is in shambles. There's a lot of abuse, a lot of a lot of pornography, a lot of uh, just seeking after the world, seeking
Hmm.
after this fulfillment that clearly wasn't existent in what I was reading in the Bible,
Yep.
what the preachers were speaking about, and seeing their lives were also in shambles. And it's just there was no example that I would call myself uh, a desire, well, that I would desire to follow. So I was like, this
Yep.
stuff is not for me. So I went because I had to, not because I wanted to. There was a lot of intrigue because I've always desired this sense of fantasy and superhero powers. You know, loving the feeling of uh, watching Marvel
Hmm.
and superhero movies, Spider-Man, and I'm like, dang, it would be so cool if that stuff existed.
Yeah.
And reading the Bible, there's a lot of that crazy fantasy stuff. You know, like Nephilim. There's stuff
Yep.
like angels, dragons, uh,
Hmm.
crazy miracles like coins coming out of fishes' mouths, food multiplying, people walking on water, walking around a building and it falls down. Noah, like, and finding out that the ark is still on Mount Ararat, like
Hmm.
it's in the Bible. That stuff, it's like in the back of my mind, I felt like there was something here, but I just didn't see any evidence of that. So it felt pretty abysmal
Yeah.
because I still wanted to believe, but So my mom, one night, she kind of forced me to go to this church. It was like a youth event. I just went, the usual people that we always know and connect with. We're all friends, but the whole Jesus thing just, it was still on the fringe for me.
Hmm.
So we're all putting our hands up because that's kind of what you do, you know? You
Yep.
praise and worship, close your eyes. You kind of look like everyone else because if you stand out, you're kind of uncool, you know?
Yep.
And this random dude comes up to me and he says like, "Hey, is your name Anthony?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And he starts what I know now is prophesying, and he tells me stuff about my dad that only me and him knows.
Okay.
And I was this is the first time I was not just intrigued, but I was shocked. You know, one of those like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
You know, like, are you either psychic or this God thing is that I read in the Bible can be real? So I just kind of like I kind of stalked the guy for after that point. I was like, bro, tell me everything you know. Like, how did you do this? Like, teach me your ways. I want to have superpowers like this. And he
Make
would
me your
go,
Padawan.
yeah, I was like, please, I'll take anything you can give me. He's like, bro, I'm leaving soon to go back to Pietermaritzburg, which is like a town 7 hours from here, from my town, which is East London,
Okay.
South Africa. And I was like, all right, that's it. That was fun, cool. Um, Series of events. Long story short, I bumped into him 3 times randomly. Once when I was at work at McDonald's, bumped into him and his wife randomly at a McDonald's,
Hmm.
and it kept happening to the point where he was like, "Dude, there's no coincidence. Like we should connect more."
Yeah.
He took me to his house. He slept in the Finger of God, Father of Lights movies. I watched
Nice.
all three of them back to back, crying my eyes out. For some reason, it just hit me, and I had no clue why I was crying. And I was like, bro, whatever these people are doing, this is what I want to do. So he's like,
Hmm.
are you sure? And he's like, all right, you want to try it out? So he took me to the rubbish dumps of South Africa and took me to this random hut that smelled like garbage and crap, you know?
Hmm.
And they were singing. There was a bunch of mamas, you know, like as we would say in South Africa, like the black ladies.
Yep.
And they were doing the worship thing. And afterwards, he said, "All right, four chairs, come up. If you need healing, God's going to heal you today." He calls me up front, and he's like, "Dude, it's time for you to try this." I was like,
Yep.
"Bro, what?" It's like you didn't even give me a crash course here, you know? So this lady, she came up, she had cataracts. Apparently, her eyes were like kind of like the movies where you see
Where
the
they're
white
white.
over. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Glazed over.
exactly. I thought she was blind or something, but so they held up fingers, like 4 fingers. Can you see? And she said no. And basically, he took my hand, put it on her face, like over her eyes and her face, like right here.
Hmm.
And he said, like, don't make it short and sweet. Just ask Jesus to heal her. And I was like, all right, sure. Didn't believe it at all, obviously. I was like, okay. So I put my hand on her eyes, prayed for her, took my hands off. Her eyes were perfect. Like instantly,
That's
like went from glazed over to absolutely crystal clear.
that's incredible.
And she didn't react whatsoever, which in my brain, I was like, okay, this didn't happen, but I clearly saw her eyes before. I saw what her eyes look like now. So something happened inside of me. I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in this existential crisis that's happening in front of me.
Uh-huh.
So she goes and sits down. She picks up her baby, which is a newborn, and she keeps looking at this child. And I think it's at that point where I realized, like, bro, she's seeing her child's face for the first time.
Yeah.
And it just hit me so hard, man. I was crying, you know, one of those cries. It's not like it was just running down my face. And Josh, the mentor at that time, is just like, "Yeah, bro,
Look
yeah," you know. So at
what
that
the Lord
point,
can do.
it's like, yeah. He was like, "Welcome to your new life." So that was pretty much my life every week. I would just go to their house, jump over their wall at like 8:30, knock on their door, be like, bro, let's go. I was fully in, man. I was,
Teach me.
yeah, exactly. Everything they could teach me in those 3 months before they moved to back to America. They took me with them, changed my life. And
Mhm.
that was the beginning journey of being in America, starting a life there, back and forth. It's a long story.
And you've been a bit of a wild man ever since, because you kind of just went with the flow for the next handful of years, right?
Absolutely, man. I fully winged it. Whenever I'm a worship leader, and back then I was using music in bars
Okay.
and for money. But as I transitioned from that point, that's all I did was worship. I started writing worship music,
Hmm.
and I would pretty much go and lead worship or do worship in some capacity every week, anywhere that anyone would say yes to
That's
for
awesome.
a year straight. And then at that point, I was just a vagabond traveling wherever doors opened. I didn't, when you're single, you're like, bro, I don't care. I'll
Yeah.
sleep on a couch. I'll live off of $100,
Yep.
which was, I was rich with $100, back in the day, eating bagels 3 times a day. Oh man,
Dude, how'd you get
fun times.
around?
I got around because whoever was asking me to sing, kind of the
Uh-huh.
word got around, and I would stay. There's this lady, her name's Nancy Majira, and she took me in. She said, she was taking wild strays.
Yeah.
Like there was this guy Josh Porter, which one of my good friends still,
Hmm.
and he stayed with her, and he went to organization called CFAN with Rainer Bonke and Daniel Kalenda.
Okay.
Yeah, just some evangelists that goes to Africa all the time. And he basically said like, she's out of town, but just stay with me. And when she comes back, I'll convince her that you're a good guy to stay around. So bad. So she came home and she was frustrated. She was angry, man. She's like, you let this random dude in my house. And I think it was like 3 hours later, she came out of her room and she was like, well, God told me you're easy to please with food, so you can stay. It was
That's fantastic.
so random, dude. I was like, oh, thank you, God. I have a place to live. So it was random, man. Honestly, I was living off of faith like I can't remember
Yeah.
doing now. Like the faith I was living back then, I'm still quite perplexed at how I was that kind of human being.
Wow.
Now being married, having a 9 to 5, having a house, it's a different type of responsibility, but also a different place to steward what it
Oh yeah.
looks like to trust the Lord when you have your own income, when
Yeah.
you're kind of self-sufficient and you have to give over stuff to the Lord. It's a weird space, man.
Oh, dude, I get it. I mean, like, look at my life. I did ministry hard until I was like 24-ish, 25. All throughout my teens and stuff, and most of my early 20s, I was just kind of, all right, jump out of the boat, see what happens, and try to walk on water. And dude, the amount of times I'd just like cross the country, or I'd go to YWAM, or I'd quit my job and go do this ministry thing, or like go to Ferguson and get in the middle of protests and basically watch the Lord stop riots from happening and like
Dang.
crazy stuff like that. And then, I go into a season of being married and everything sort of slows down, but couldn't figure that out. And then that blew up. And next thing I know, I'm living in a van, for 3 years and traveling around
Uh,
and living kind of just day to day, figuring it out. And the Lord kept providing just randomly, like all those seasons, the Lord would provide in weird, crazy ways. Whoa. But the Lord would provide in crazy ways. Like, I mean, there's two different times in my life that I can look back at where where either we or I was given a free vehicle, or I wouldn't know where the money was going to come for all the bills that I had, and then all of a sudden I'd have an
Wow.
opportunity to make a little bit or whatever. And now being married, like it's cool because there's that favor of the Lord on me still, and so
Yeah.
even my wife inherits that, and
100%.
but at the same time, there's that level of like, okay, now there's an extra level of responsibility that it's like, yeah, we have
Mm.
like when it's time to trust the Lord and jump out of the boat, like that will be there. But
Yeah.
also, we're building something now and we're rooting down. And I know you can attest to that because you've said before that you and your wife, like that was a contention with your with her family, was just kind of the like, oh, these things don't make sense that you're doing, but somehow
Right.
you come out smelling like lo roses because
Right.
the Lord's on you. So yeah, man.
It's wild, dude.
Yeah.
I agree with that fully. Our parents, at least my wife's parents, they're like, you're doing some random stuff with my daughter,
Hmm.
and how are you going to provide? Like, where is this going? You know?
Yep.
And honestly, most of the time, we didn't know where it was going. We just feel like it would be best explained by when we just got married, someone prophesied over us like, your wife's the bow and you're the arrow. Like your wife will have foresight for your family. She'll be dreaming. She'll see into the future. She will point you in the right direction. And your job is to execute. Just let go and you're the arrow. Execute the job. Make sure you follow through on what the Lord says,
Yeah.
and things will go well for you. But if you don't, you will face the turmoil of life.
Yeah.
And I feel like more often than not in the last 3 years, I have struggled, man. I've struggled busting my way into the arrow. I've like chilled on in the quaff,
Hmm.
so to say, and I didn't want to get out and actually take risks, which is what I was used. That's what I was known for,
Yeah.
is the guy to take risks. And even at our wedding, the pastor who was officiating a wedding is like, Anthony's known for being a risk taker, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
How how have I strayed so far from that space?
Yeah, so let's kind of get to that. So you met your wife, ended up back in South Africa for a little bit, and then you came back over here. You guys got married, correct?
Yeah,
And then you stayed, you said in Texas, where she's from for a while, and then you
yeah,
guys came out to Bethel, the BSSM school
yeah.
of ministry. And are you saying that it's in that place that you stopped taking so many risks?
That's weird because it's a risk in one way because the school especially focuses on the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So
Hmm.
I took a ton of risks in the gifts, ton of risks in the prophetic, stepping out and mentoring people, seeing so much life. But I think behind closed doors, when it was just my wife and I, it was this struggle of, oh man, I'm working a 9 to 5. My God, where are you with this supernatural provision like it used to be? You know,
Hmm.
there were so many times I can like I've lost count of how many times God has shown us a financial favor in the most insane ways. I
Yep.
feel like the last 2 years has felt like, wow, God, maybe you're putting us on a new level of responsibility where you're not just going to bring stuff our way, but that we would actually go out and say, it's time for me to like dig my own well to actually like go after things, and you'll
Hmm.
be there in the midst. So I think I'm in that space of realizing God gives us a lot more responsibility than we think
Okay.
we're supposed to hold, you know?
Yeah. So
And
I think I misunderstood you. What you're saying was that the hard part is more so that now it feels like you're taking less risks because you're living a little less on the edge. Is that what you're saying?
right,
Okay.
exactly. Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. I get that a little bit. Part of me, I'm in a season where I crave the stability, and I got tired
Right.
of living in a van. I got tired of like all that. And I was like, I want to build something. And honestly, for me, the whole reason I moved into the van in the first place was partially I wanted to spend a little bit of time like living life. I felt like I had either given so much to ministry or to the life I had lived in between those years, that I felt like I hadn't like lived real well. So I went
Yeah.
and did my thing with the Go Fast Don't Die guys for a year, and that was awesome. And then the next couple of years was me trying to figure out what was next. But I felt the Lord
Mm.
kind of call me back to it. But the original intention was partially too like I need to go find my people. I need to find a place that I can like actually anchor down. Like I want to eventually, build something. But in order, I knew it wasn't in Indiana, so I was like, what's the best way to do it? Well, I'll go live a little while on the road.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so for me, it's a little less difficult for that for me. One thing that is a little difficult is like if things get too mundane, because I'm a creature of habit, I need
Right.
the consistency, but at the same time, if things get too mundane, after a while, I'm like, I need to shake it up.
I'm the same
But
way.
it's good and it's different. It's a learning curve to like
Oh
go
yeah.
go from living on the edge to all of a sudden going like, okay, now it's time to root down and dig a well. And it's funny because I crave that right now, but at the same time, we're in the midst of, knowing that eventually we're moving back to the Midwest to be closer to her
Right.
family. And so it's like, well, we can't really root down now, but we're like
Right.
planning for it, but we're also sort of like, I don't know. It's an interesting season, but I get that, man. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, dude.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
now, I mean, you're married man now. I feel like I don't know if anything psychologically has changed for you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Like how's your mind space before and after? Has it changed at all, or has it kind of just been the same? Like, because everyone's different. Everyone,
Well, there is a little bit of this reality of like, okay, I am the man, I am the head of the household as the Bible dictates, and there is a responsibility there to provide. So there definitely is a bit more weight on the fact that like it's not just me anymore. I
right,
where I could scrounge by on $1,000 a month, which I did for several months. I can't live like that anymore. That's not really an option anymore. And so
right,
there is a certain responsibility of like making sure that we're at a point where everything is covered as best as possible, while at the same time recognizing that like the Lord is ultimately the one that takes care of us, and
right,
if things do get squirrely, then I'm still going to trust him to take care of it all. And there will
mm,
be a level of grace that will probably lead to more than $1,000 a month, I'm sure. But at the same time, knowing that while I can do something, I'm required to do it. And so there is a weight there. There is a psychological shift in that. But then there's also the psychological shift from the years where I was like, I'm just trying to live. I want to experience things and I want to,
right.
enjoy myself a little bit more. Um, living off the back of a motorcycle half the year.
Yeah, of course.
But then coming back to like, okay, but now I want to dig, I want to
Wow.
build, I want to, I would love to be somewhat self-sustainable. And with that self-sustainability, whether it be building a homestead the way that we would like to eventually, or,
Right,
when it comes to having kids, when it comes to owning land, that requires you to be in one spot more. And so there is
right.
there's those mindset shifts where it's for sure
Wow.
important to do what I can to be, you know,
Hmm.
to be the provider that I'm called to be. Um,
Ah,
but I don't know that that's like some of that is inherent to getting married, but some of that is more so inherent to stepping more fully into what I think the Lord has called me to. However, those handful of years on the road, like I believe that the Lord used those in a critical way to make me more of a holistic person,
yeah.
um, to become more like a more full picture of who I'm supposed to be. But at the same time, he's bringing me back to that, like, okay, now. you have to take all of those years, whether it be the ministry years and the on the road years and the lessons you learned in between and all
Hmm.
that stuff, and culminate it into the next season and build something. So I think
Dang.
it's a little bit of both, the getting married and the stepping into what I feel like the Lord's called me to long term.
Wow. That's cool. So yours is kind of more like a shift gear into like now we're doing stuff together. Like it's interesting because mine was so different. Mine was more emotional
Hmm.
and like psychologically, a psychological shift. You know, obviously growing up in a very unstable household, mine was very much like there was not a lot of trust. There wasn't a lot of feeling of security. So I think before I got married, there was a lot of insecurity, a lot of frustration of
Right.
like, is she really mine? Like, am I going to have her full like love, or am I going to have a full affection or full trust connection?
Hmm.
I don't think I psychologically believed that that existed because I've been in so many relationships that just fell apart quickly. A
Hmm.
lot of my own doing as well, especially my sexual addiction that
Yep.
really destroyed every relationship that I was in.
Hmm.
And Mary was the only one, like she saw all the ugliness and it wouldn't say it didn't phase her, but she wasn't rattled enough to have it be even a big issue as much in the beginning.
She was
You
willing to
said
work through it rather than
right,
just run from it.
exactly. And she didn't even look frustrated. She was ready to go on that journey because she's experienced stuff in the past as well with her exes,
Hmm.
and it's just really it was relieving, but I didn't know how long it would last and if marriage was the answer.
Hmm.
But I think right after we got married, we eloped pretty much, and the same lady that took me in because I'm easy to feed, you know, happened to also be our officiant at our elopement wedding
Okay.
inside our house, which was an absolute winged moment 2 days after I came to the States.
Okay.
And
Came back, you mean?
I came back, yeah, the first time, or the first time with her
Yeah.
out after having the actual visa to a K1 visa, so I could legally be here. Um, it was until after we got married, we got into bed, and I just felt such crazy relief. It was super strange, you know. I even like a super random thing. It was the first time I heard a demon's voice as well,
Okay.
which is super random, but it just like I can't remember what it said, but it was a thing that just shocked me and just took me back. But for some reason in that moment as well, I was like, oh, if that exists, then the supernatural, like hearing God's voice or an angel, should exist as well. There was a lot of weird things that coincided in that moment for me. It was,
Hmm.
oh God, like you were really here, and obviously what we did like rattled the enemy
Mm.
because they've never come at me at that point
Dude.
as much as he did at that moment. So I was like, dang, something good's happening,
Yeah, man.
you
Like
know?
the amount to which marriage actually is an affront to the demonic.
Yeah,
Dude,
it's
it's awesome. It's awesome and it's weighty and it's beautiful, but man, like we've touched on so many things. I've like put mental pins
I
in
know, same,
that I want to come back to.
exactly.
Um,
Same.
but that point in particular, like we can kind of walk through this a little bit. But I I've been in a season where since my job is it's just hands-on. I don't usually when I have to think, I can pause everything and just think.
Right.
But most of the time, I can just work and not think. So I put on podcasts, right? And most of the podcasts are spiritual in nature, you know, whether it be the Blurry Creatures guys or the, you know, or the
Yeah.
The Exorcist Files has been one that I've been listening to a lot, and there's so many spiritual implications to a lot of it that like a lot of to everything really. But the Exorcist Files, some of the stuff that he focuses on is that like whether you're doing occult things or what the Catholic Church considers what do they call it? It's mortal sin, which is basically the idea that there's certain sins that are going to affect you in a much more potent way, I think.
Right.
Whether
Kind of
that
like Paul
be,
said, sexual sin.
yep, sexual sin, or, even like I'm sure they consider stuff like murder and like that what we as humans would consider like the worst of the worst kind of sins, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, those give the enemy a much better handhold, right, on our lives. And so, Father
Mm.
Carlos Martin, he talks a lot about how sexual sin will open those doors and things. And there's other things, but he talks about how it's marriage and it's the unification of man and woman becoming uh, the embodiment or the incarnation of like the Christ and the bride on earth,
Right.
right? Like the representation of that, the church and Jesus and all this stuff. Like it's an affront to the enemy, and the enemy hates it, and so that's why there's such a fight against it. But it's those sexual deviancies or lusts or sins or whatever that can really tear apart, relationships. But it's our need to fight through it
Right.
that gives us the freedom to actually between that and being emotionally connected give us
Mm.
so much opportunity to live in a greater peace than most people ever experience, man. Like
Right.
I'm not sure. Like I'm trying to articulate all these things that
Right.
but
No, I totally
um,
get it, man.
yeah, dude, it's beautiful. Marriage is so beautiful in that.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I feel passionate enough about to like really want to talk about because we went
Yeah.
through the
Same.
pre-marriage course on at Bethel and dude, like a lot of that stuff. I remember now me, I had gone through being married before I got divorced, and that thing I remember coming out of it and being like, well, I want to be a better person for the next time I get married, right? So I spent a
Right.
lot of work on the emotional stuff and praise God, Emma did the same in growing yourself emotionally in such a way that like when we went into that course, they're given like all this relational advice, mostly communication, on like how to communicate well so that you're not fighting each other, but you're actually coming to each other all the time thinking like, no, we're on the same team. Like misunderstandings are going to happen, but that doesn't mean that
Right.
like, her emotions don't mean that I'm a bad person. Because
Right.
she feels something doesn't mean that, the truth is I'm terrible or something like that. So I don't
Right.
have to come in. Anyways, all that to
Yeah.
say,
It's
like,
like being defensive and trying
yep.
to defend yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Versus being willing to accept that, like, oh, I don't necessarily have to defend myself here. I can just express myself and not be a villain and let them express themselves and not consider them a villain because
Right.
maybe it's just a misunderstanding, maybe it's something else. And
Right.
all of that comes to a head on whether or not you have a really healthy relationship or not.
Right.
And praise God, we've been able to come to the point where like we've actually got a list of questions that we try to hit every week where we're like, hey, let's
Man, that's
check
so
in.
good.
What's going on like in these positions? Like, is there any way that I hurt you that I didn't realize, this week? Or even let's come back to the porn topic, stop watching porn. Like are there any points in which, like for me, with that being a touch point on my history,
Right.
like
Same.
have I been tempted this week? That's a question that comes
Right.
up. Like, is there anything that tempted me? And it's man, that's a big one too. Like yeah,
For
we should
every
talk about
man
that. Hmm.
ever.
Well,
Oh,
every man and so many women in this age,
you're
but
right. It's true.
yeah, man. Like that, this sticker comes from a company called Fight the New Drug. And they're actually, funny enough, they're the reason why Emma
Dang.
and I met because they reposted one of my photos, and that's why she saw me and got to know me through Instagram.
Dude, thank the Lord for social media. There's hope. There's hope.
Dude, as much as I am so frustrated with social media lately, I still love it for that reason. Like most of my life right now is because of social media. But yeah, we met
Like
because
the
of Fight the New Drug.
like the like the 24-hour ban of TikTok and now it's back.
I don't care about that. I haven't been on TikTok in so long.
Yeah, same.
But
Uh,
they're really cool because even though they're not spiritually rooted as an organization, dude, their stuff is so good because it's all mental health driven and it's also justice driven in the fact that like so many people are trafficked for pornography and stuff. But I remember listening to just even this one scientist lady, she was talking on their socials about how viewing pornography actually like the more you watch it, the more dopamine hits you get, and it actually it's almost like removing the brake calipers from your brain in its desire to chase dopamine. So like
mm,
what that means essentially is it inhibits your brain from being able to stop yourself. So like
yeah,
when you should have an inhibition that comes up and goes, you know what, this is probably a bad idea. I shouldn't do this. Like it almost turns that off in your brain and makes it significantly harder for you to stop doing it,
right.
which is damaging for the brain. Then there's all the psychology behind what it does to relationships, what it does to people's, idea of another person. Like pornography on every level is terrible. Like I had a
Absolutely.
discussion with somebody a long time ago about like quote unquote ethical pornography, and I don't even believe that's a good thing, especially
Wow.
because of what we believe about the spiritual aspect of it. Like
Absolutely.
it is bondage in the spirit. It is bondage
Right.
in the mental health space. It is bondage to even like your body because it messes up your hormones in such a way.
Right.
Like even men, I'll give room for you to speak in a minute. Sorry, I'm going on a
Oh, bro,
tangent,
you're fine.
but
This is the
even
point, right? Is that the people hear the truth. So,
exactly, dude, amen. But even men, like you lose testosterone,
hmm,
and stuff if you're a chronic masturbator. Like that's a
absolutely.
thing. And
Right. It's like you stop desiring the chase of women
yep.
because you can take care of yourself.
Yep.
You
And
know?
you're going after this massive dopamine hit all the time instead of an actual relationship. And you don't get quite the same. It's like a different dopamine hit. It's not, and it doesn't even
Right.
register in the brain as much of a sexual thing. Like it
Right.
doesn't even register in the sexual part of the brain
Right.
as much
Absolutely.
as it does the part that
Yeah.
like addicts you to social media.
Right. It's a numbing. The numbing factor for me is what brought me back. Like after an orgasm or whatnot, you're like, you hit this euphoric moment where you forget about everything
Uh-huh.
and anybody, and you're in this moment. I think it's such a fleeting thing, but for some reason, for years upon years, that's I was stuck
Uh-huh.
in that cycle.
Yep.
It was wild,
You'd
man.
watch it and then you'd hate yourself after.
Yeah,
Or for me, like
absolutely.
sometimes I would engage with other people that I knew were just as broken as me online
Right.
and then there'd be that after moment where I'm like, it's the same thing as like, when people hook up, it's like
Yeah,
that like after where you're just like, I hate myself and I don't want to be here
right.
anymore. And now I feel terrible because of what just happened.
Right.
It's
And
horrible.
especially if you're a mentor in any way or anyone looks up to you or asks you advice, you feel like what do I have to offer? Because the things I like Paul says like what I don't want to do, I do, you know,
Mhm.
it's an ugly cycle
It
that
is.
can ruin your life.
Amen. Amen. But yeah, dude, and that's just on the psychological level. Like I've been listening to and talking to people that actually see in the spirit and, just the amount of demonic access, like I was saying with the Exorcist files, like there have been some people that become demonically afflicted because of either um, broken relationships with a person that they're not
Mm,
married to, or just from pornography itself, like the amount of demons that attach themselves to you. And you basically like and I haven't gotten into this in the podcast, and this is something I do want to get into is the idea of opening yourself up to the spirit and stuff like this. But like, why not just jump dead first? Like, I'm all
Yeah,
about
why
it,
not?
you
Let's
know?
go.
But it opens up this door and it gives them ability to like, I remember that anytime I would give into pornography, the next handful of days, I would be so much more apt to be pissed for no reason.
Right.
Like
100%.
it gave way to not only the self-loathing, but also like it would just be the flash in the pan anger of like, man, and
Right.
that's like that to me is like, oh, there's demons still holding on to me, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Huh.
but people,
Interesting.
like Micah Turnbow, I listened to him talk about how he would be addicted to it for a long time and he would be watching, but he's also a seer in the spirit. So he would see
Oh,
demons,
wow.
either in the porn or even around him, like, coming at him and he'd try to ignore it, but sometimes he couldn't. He'd be like, this is terrible. Why am I doing this?
Right.
It's wild, man. Like the amount of levels at which pornography just ruins us, and it's so
Right.
prevalent. And like every time, like even when I opened the Instagram account for this podcast, like I
Yeah.
had to go through and I had to like not interested, not interested, not
Oh,
because
dude,
it
it's so
immediately is like,
insane.
here's all this smut, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
want
I was so
nothing to do with
surprised.
this.
Same thing. I opened Instagram the other day, and the first thing that popped up was like three videos of ladies with big boobs. And I'm like,
Hmm.
bro, come
Yeah,
on.
and you have to
Like
go and
you are
like,
trying. I'm just not gonna open this app for a while.
yeah, right,
It's just
right.
insane.
Right. Yeah. And I have to go through and like very intentionally be like, not interested or report so that it just stops coming up on my feed. Like,
Right.
I don't want it. Like, and it's crazy too that it's so normalized. Like, there's an interesting correlation I've noticed in people that are totally okay with it and the health of their relationships. Most of the time, their relationships are terrible or they don't have a good
Wow.
relationship or a relationship at all because the like it's so damaging. And I've
I
known a lot
agree.
of people that are like, I can't date a guy that's still so addicted to it because, then a lot of times they act a certain way. And a lot of times they
Yeah.
try to act out of that mentality because it's over
Yeah.
sexualizes you and it makes everything so like I listen to
100%.
guys in the blue collar world because I'm a welder and I listen to guys all the time and I'm like they'll be talking about stuff and I'm like, man, you have a wife, dog. Like what is
Like, what are you doing?
like why are you like how broken are you that you are acting like this or you're talking like this? Because nobody that like really is connected with their wife is going to be okay talking about another woman this way, you know?
Right. Absolutely. I can't understand it.
Hmm.
Absolutely cannot understand it.
Yeah. It's super revealing about how how good a person's life is. And then on top of that,
Right.
you hear them like, "Ah, another Monday. And it's like, man, to hate so much of your life. But that's another topic, dude.
And 9 to 5.
Yeah.
That 9 to 5 topic is literally a full on podcast right
Well,
there.
I don't mind the 9 to 5 thing anymore. I mean, it's not that bad. And perspective says that ultimately, like Monday is just another day. It's not that bad. Like I don't hate my job. And
Right.
so as much as I like would love to be doing other stuff, I'm not so like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel
You're
like
okay, you're okay in your process.
yeah, I feel like when you are okay with like when you're connected with your spouse or you're secure in yourself, when you're, generally enjoying your life and you don't hate your job,
Right.
then there's no reason for you to hate Mondays. Like,
Right.
sure, they're not the best, but like there's no reason for me to be like, "Oh, I hate Monday." It's like, "No, it's another Monday. Great, another week of this, but like it's not that bad. It's
That's
fine.
true.
This is cool."
Makes sense. Only thing I hate about Mondays is going out in the cold, which, oh my God. Oh, having to scrape my
Dreaded.
window. Oh, dude.
After the weekend of sitting inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the perfectly warm house with all the warm food you could ever want.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then like out there doing roofing or
Oh yeah.
whatnot. And you're like,
Yeah.
ugh.
Because you do the full spectrum construction, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much everything that entails.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
painful. But you work in a warehouse too. That's
Well, I used to also
un
do construction, but I do work in an warehouse that's open to the elements. So yeah, it gets pretty cold here. It hasn't been too bad this winter though, thank God.
oh wow.
Yeah.
So
So it's been cold,
obviously
but
a
not terrible.
whole lot better in Reading, clearly.
Oh, yeah. But once we move back to Ohio, I'm kind of dreading that a little bit. I'm not gonna
Oh,
lie.
dude, it's so cold in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
Oh
Uh-huh.
gosh.
But all right, another pin I had put in the conversation was you mentioned in regards to like before you really believed in God, it didn't feel very authentic. But then once you
Mm,
had once you ran into an authentic expression of the faith, that's when you decided to jump into it. And there's been
right,
something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and it has to do with our generation and its desire for authenticity. And I think
right,
that's actually why so many people are looking for different spiritual things. I think that's why we're in the age of post-atheism, what a lot of people are
right,
calling it, because most people are realizing like actually atheism doesn't fully make sense. Most of the Darwinistic
right.
stuff doesn't make sense. And so
Yeah.
there's definitely spiritual stuff. So they start to seek it out and they
Wow.
run into entities, whether it be through weed and psychedelics or through other
Right.
stuff, and then they have these spiritual experiences, and then like, wait a minute, this is real. So like, what's
Hmm.
actually real? And then that's a whole broad brush, but I also think it opens up the door to even conspiracy. Like, why are people looking for truth so heavily that they're willing to, look into old CIA documents and all that stuff? And we don't
Right.
necessarily have to go down that road per se,
Hey,
but
bring it.
I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think about the authentic expression, like, and what do you think about this generation and its need for authenticity, and how do you see it as like, do you see it as a good thing? Do you see it as a bad thing? How are you seeing that kind of form our generation and the generation subsequent generations that have come after us?
Right, like Gen Zs,
Hmm. Yeah, because
basically.
you and I are millennial, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and even Gen Z's
Man,
having it, but I feel like
I agree.
we sort of kicked it off because I feel like our parents'
Exactly.
generation wasn't super worried
Yeah,
about
I
it.
think exactly. I agree. I think the age of the internet changed a lot of things. I think that's a big point, especially you and I are similar. We love to research.
Hmm.
And I think there's more information out there now than ever before
Yep.
that we can just sift through. And obviously, there's been a lot of, I guess, cutting off of one viewpoint. And you only see your viewpoint, and you're kind of pigeonholed to like the right or the left or
Yep.
whatnot.
The
But
algorithmic bubble.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like obviously, if anything is as good experiment as any is this year's election, right? It's clear that people's eyes are opened and they realize, dang, like there has to be another way.
Yep.
We can't just keep going the same way, expecting different results. And I think that was my life too. It's exactly why I, in the beginning, I would listen, I would obey, I would do whatever was told of me. But in the back of my mind, I needed this desire of truth. And I don't know if it's like both of us like the Enneagram. Like I love the Enneagram for the fact that it's
Yep.
an easy identifier. You know,
Yep.
you being an eight, I'm a three,
Hmm.
and it's just both these personality types are high like authenticity seeking people, and I just feel like I've always desired this thing of man, I need to find out what is true because if
Yeah.
I don't, like before you know it, you're going down this rabbit hole and wasting years of your life doing God knows what for no
Yep.
reason. So
Yep.
I wanted to sift through all the mess, and Christianity just wasn't that thing for me. It took forever to get jump past all of the hierarchy and the hypocrisy, the pharisaical
And the
thinking of,
bureaucracy.
oh, I'm better than you. I'm like, this church has the truth. Your church has doesn't have the truth,
Hmm.
and I feel like all of that is just garbage, pure
Yeah.
garbage. So I think like Jesus was a perfect representation for me. Is He walked out this supernatural life. He said we were not just natural, but we're supernatural, all of
Yeah.
us. If only we believe.
Yeah.
I think the belief system really intrigued me, um, because the only difference between me before I went to that church or that meeting in the hut
Hmm.
and saw someone's eyes open was belief. That's the only difference between me before and me after.
Yeah.
Is if once I believed, I could walk out these things and have these superpowers, so to say, at my fingertips whenever I wanted. If all I did is like looked after people and not be selfish.
Hmm.
I think that's what I see this generation is moving out of is this for a long time we've just been selfish. There's a lot of like selfish desires, like I want to be this, I want to do this, the feminism movement. Like there's just this deep desire to like raise up people, but it doesn't come from a very good place, I
Yeah.
feel.
To please
Like
self. Yeah.
obviously, right. Obviously there's good people in every type of organization, but the premise of it all, it just seems like the pendulum swings way too far to the left to the right. And I
Hmm.
feel like people are just sick of this whole spiel and they want to get to the truth quickly. And the internet, especially with ChatGPT now, AI, it's truth is at your fingertips, quick, pretty quick. And obviously,
Yeah.
there's definitely some sways with the government algorithms and how they set up things, so it fights against truth.
Hmm.
But you can pretty quickly sift through things if you just have an objective mind. I feel like music, especially in the last, let's say, the last 3 years, um, I've had, I've joined a love for music again, just listening to music
Yeah.
because the music is actually very real, very honest, very focused on like this is how I feel. I'm not going to hide who I am because I want likes or I want someone to think that I'm cool. This is just who I am.
Hmm.
And I don't know, you're probably in the same boat where I truly just don't care what people think of me, the perception they have of me.
Right.
You know, even some of my close friends are like, "You're a clumsy dude," and like you aren't much of a forward thinker. Uh, at work, I'm not like the most. I would just say,
Quote unquote efficient.
my yeah, efficient or my spatial awareness isn't as good as everyone else's. But I'm like, bro, this is all I have to give. Like, I
Just
can only
running into like doorways and stuff like that. I do that sometimes.
exactly, dude. That or like, bro, you should start at the top, unscrewing a cabinet, not at the bottom.
Hmm.
You know, super basic common sense, sickle things that people get. But I feel like in many areas of my life, I fall short, but in other areas, I have strength. And I just learned, okay, it's time for me to just play into my strengths,
Yeah.
see the things that God has created me for. And one of those things for me is to get back into music. Um, I just feel like that's what this generation is wanting is just, like you said, authenticity. It's like
Hmm.
cut the bullshit, just get to the point.
Yeah.
Like I just tell me who you are,
Yeah.
so that we can start from ground zero. And
Yeah.
same as the Christian movement, exactly. It's the reason I started this podcast as well, this the Honest podcast. It's like it's time for us to show that Christians are just normal people,
Yeah.
that we have the same struggles, the same questions, the same uh, like life events happen to us, but it's how we handle the things that come our way, and it's how we bring other people in to help us through the process instead of doing it ourselves,
Hmm.
or processing things and blaming others for what you haven't yet experienced because you didn't even know that you had the power to work on your own triggers
Hmm.
and your own difficulties. This is what the power of what Christianity gives us.
Yeah.
What Jesus gives us is this key power to unlock what was wrong and what happened, and you have the full power in our neuropathic and neuropaths to actually change the broken things, to heal and fix the the ways our brain has been wired since we were children,
Hmm.
and that you can truly restore, yeah, and become like your child self again, like fully vibrant, fully creative, fully ready to take on like whatever it takes. That's
Hmm.
exactly what I'm on, this process of trying to slowly sift through, because it really isn't something you can speed up and quickly, like, I am fixed. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Bible says, like, you work out your salvation with fear and trembling. It takes time. And if you're okay with the slow process and you allow yourself to get hit by a trigger and then deal with it as it comes on, same as like the argument I had with my wife yesterday. Simple thing where she's like, man, for years and years, I've been telling you, I'm sick of you being on your phone.
Hmm.
And you just don't give a damn. You just don't care at all.
Hmm.
Like for years, you've been doing this over and over. And it's like, I didn't know what way to spin this for you to like get that this hurts me,
Hmm.
And I was sitting on the floor, and a common thing I do when I'm like in rock and hard places, I start smiling. I don't know why I do this, but
Okay.
I'm like, oh, babe, I don't know why I'm in this place. I don't know why it's so hard for me to kick this addiction, like scrolling
Yeah.
and just being just. I love research, but I do it I do it way too much, and I find myself always in this perpetual motion of finding things that make me relax, but at the worst times, while
Hmm.
your kid's running around and he needs you, or while your wife's talking to you and you're like, while you're scrolling, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
realize like, man, I do this way more often than I even cognitively realize.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
It's,
makes sense.
yeah, no, I think it does. Like the be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and like the Lord actually gives us tools and how to do that and to become more our full selves. I do want to say that like the scrolling on the phone, it feels like it's relaxing, but the
Yeah.
wild thing is that like in our brain, it actually isn't. Not only that, dude, the stuff I'm learning about light right now, blue light is actually like it's damaging our circadian rhythm. It's damaging our
Mm,
our ability to actually rest and get into like I guess a lower stress state, I guess.
yeah.
And so, dude, like the reality is like, and maybe that helping keep this in mind might help is that like actually sitting here scrolling, feeling numb isn't the same thing as being restful. Like it's actually
No.
the opposite. You're
Yeah.
numb, but you're actually destroying your ability to like really rest and to chill out and stuff. And
True.
dude, I get it a little bit. Like every once in a while I'll catch myself and or her and I'll be like scrolling or whatever, and I'm like, okay, throw the phone away. Like let's actually engage and stuff, dude.
Right.
But yeah, it's a real addiction, and it was designed that way on purpose. Like we know that, we
Yeah.
know.
Logically, we know it's the truth,
Hmm. Yeah, we
but
know that ultimately, like the social media companies engineered their stuff to be addictive. Like we know that. We also know based off of released declassified CIA documents that back in like I think it was the 60s maybe that they did experiments through stuff like MK Ultra and stuff on like how different lights can actually affect you and make you more quote unquote brain dead. And blue light is one of those ways in which they do that. And so, um, yeah, man, that's one reason why I was like, maybe flip phone and an iPod. And maybe the flip phone right now isn't realistic, but like definitely the iPod,
right,
like get the phone
right.
out of my face. I don't freaking need it all the time. Like I don't
Right.
need like I'm not texting people that often that I need to have it on me all the time. I'm not
Right.
calling people that often. Like basically just like and I don't even sleep with it in my room anymore. I plug it in the living room and then I go in and we've got an actual like daylight, quote unquote daylight, one of those lighting up alarm clocks that goes off every
Yeah.
morning and
Yeah.
it gets it out of our face. And that way I'm not sitting there at night trying to scroll on it and ruining my rhythm
Exactly.
even worse and ruining my brain. It's
Exactly.
so bad. But yeah, man, I get it. I get it. It's rough. And the addictiveness of today's culture is so bad. You know,
Yeah.
we're dopamine depleted. Like
Yeah.
our dopamine systems have been so jacked up that we're just, it's not good, man. It's not good.
I agree. It's one of my biggest things I'm working on.
One thing that might help, I've been listening to Dr. Jack Cruz, brain surgeon, and I've been listening to Dr. Alexis Cowan. She's out of actually, I'm not even going to try to remember which school she came from, but they're both researchers of light and how it affects us. And she has a brand of blue light blocking glasses.
Hmm.
From what I understand about the blue light thing is that if you're using the actual blue light blockers, and if they are clear, they're not blocking blue light. It's not at all. And even a lot of the orange ones aren't blocking blue light. So you've got to get some like
Wow.
quality ones that actually block blue light. But because the blue light is the thing that signals our brain to be addicted to it,
Huh.
just putting your phone on like nighttime mode isn't really going to block the blue light at all. So
Wow.
getting proper blue light glasses, not only does it help save your body biologically, like and heal your
Hmm.
mitochondria and keep your circadian rhythm from getting as
What
wiped
is it
out.
called? Do you know what the website is called?
Yeah, I just ordered some actually that they should be
Oh,
here
dang.
shortly. But the theoretically, from what I understand, having those on while you scroll would actually help with the dopamine problem because you're not
Uh,
getting hit by that blue light and all that extra. The other thing that you can do is turn your phone to monochromatic so that everything's black and white.
oh, yeah.
Um,
Interesting. So that would actually work.
it, in theory, it should help.
Huh.
And what it would help is dull the amount of dopamine that you get from scrolling.
Huh.
Um, the other thing is getting sunlight is massively important. The company's called Bon Charge, by the way, BON Charge, and they've got red light. Her code is Dr. Alexis for 15% off, by the way, if anybody decides they want to go down that rabbit hole. But
Yay.
the the other thing that's really beneficial is getting out into the sunlight, especially catching sunrise. But the sunlight is what helps set our circadian rhythm. And the only time that we encounter blue light in nature is midday when the sun is up a certain point. Because in the morning and in the evening, the sun give off more red spectrum type lights. And
Interesting.
once it's up enough, it starts to give off a blue light because of the way that the light comes through the atmosphere.
Huh.
And it gives a blue light throughout the mid part of the day, and that's when you're supposed to be the most awake and most alert. And so it signals your brain to be more awake and alert, and it triggers your hormones to kick in from, to not produce melatonin anymore and to start producing, your daytime hormones and yada yada. Anyway, then at
Wow.
night in nature, the only time that you would get light is from fire, and that has no blue light in it at all. So
That's cool.
the fact that all of our bulbs in our stuff, especially since what are they called? The old style bulbs that got hot,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
bulbs are now quote unquote like off the market as much incandescent because, of the Obama legislation and stuff that kind of
Interesting.
screwed us there. Then they call it energy efficiency stuff. I think that's bogus personally, but
Wow.
those lights actually did give off a more full spectrum. They gave off too much blue probably, but they gave a more full spectrum because heat is a red light, infrared. I'm
Wow.
rambling. Point
No, no,
is,
that's awesome.
yeah, point is, the fact that we're getting inundated by blue light from not only our light bulbs, but especially our phones and our
Wow.
computer screens and stuff like that, it's screwing our biology up to a massive degree. It's also degrading our mitochondria. And so our mitochondria is
Dang.
like the main, like most of our diseases today, especially chronic diseases, are from what their research shows mitochondrial diseases. The truth
Interesting.
is, the sun doesn't give you skin cancer unless you sit inside in blue light most of the time, go out and get burnt, and then hardly get any sun for the rest of the year, right? So
Wow.
that minimal exposure to the sun that burns you and stuff, that will give you melanoma, but chronic exposure to the sun will not, because
Huh.
you'll gain the vitamin D from the sun. Your mitochondria will gain the energy that it needs from the sun. It won't get burnt so bad because you'll get what's called a
Wow.
well, I mean, basically the layman's terms is a tan. But even people that can't quote unquote tan over time, they will build up a resistance to the sun anyway, and they won't
Huh.
burn anymore. But even still, like regulating the amount of time you're in the sun, uh, may be
Hmm.
necessary for some people for sure. But even
Right.
still, getting out into the sun is massively important for your mitochondria, but being inundated by blue light is destroying the mitochondria. The second
Wow.
thing is that our mitochondria are designed that when the sun is no longer, especially those of us that don't have any melanin in our, or hardly any melanin in our system, basically white people, when we are in the colder months, the sun doesn't give off as much UV. And so to compensate when our bodies are cold, um, our mitochondria actually give off its own UV light at a spectrum that you can't see in the visible
Wow.
light spectrum, but like if you have the tools to see it, you can see like the light coming off of it, and that fuels your mitochondrial uh
It's wild, dude.
operation and such. Dude,
And people say that God isn't real.
dude, dude, the light stuff, like it's been opening my mind to so much. Like even just like the Lord, let there be light, and then boom,
Wow.
there's creation. And then the fact that like at conception, they've proved that as soon as the sperm enters the egg, there's a light that flashes out. Like, dude, light is like the Lord is basically saying through all this different stuff that like the sunlight is massively important to us, and we are
Right.
not
I
getting
believe
nearly
that.
enough of it.
Yeah. Which and it kind of helps to be a construction guy.
Yeah.
You have a lot of sunlight.
Yeah, as long as you're not working indoors. But then the other thing
Exactly.
is people think like, oh, well, I'm getting a lot of natural light in my house. Well, if the windows are closed, actually because they are designed to be quote unquote energy efficient, they don't let in heat,
That's
which
true.
which means that they don't let in infrared. So
Huh.
you're not getting the full spectrum light from the sun that you should be. So you have to
Interesting.
open the windows in order to get the full spectrum light inside. The other thing is,
Wow.
the last thing I'll say on it is if you are sitting in the shade, but you're surrounded by greenery that is being lit by the sun, Dr. Alexis says that you are still getting the bounce off of the plants. And so you don't have to be
Yeah, that's
directly in the sun for it.
photosynthesis. Dang.
But I mean, basically, we're
Wow.
basically like things that photosynthesize just through a different process.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, man.
Man. And question is, how long has this research been going on for? And
Um,
how
Jack
the heck do we not know about it?
Dr. Jack Cruz says that some of this stuff was started to be discovered back in like the 50s or 60s or whatever. But
Wow.
then the one guy, Bond something, I think, got canceled because he came out, he especially came out about the radiation from like radio waves and from um like I want to I don't think Wi-Fi was at that point yet, but like the radiation from like
Wow.
phone lines and stuff like that and different electrical signals and stuff like that. He got canceled for it. Like they revoked his doctorate and everything. Um
Wow.
and and over time it's become more prevalent. But like Dr. Jack Cruz is apparently the quote unquote godfather of this whole thing right now. And
Gosh.
so you've got other people like Dr. Alexis that are talking about this stuff and making it really well known right now. And I think it's massively important. I would actually love to have her on this podcast later on once I start getting academics on to talk about different things
Right.
and
That'd be
really
so
break it down.
cool. Because I'm sure these people actually know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah. And the other
like the
thing that
details.
what she's going to do is she's in the process of building basically what's called a light lab. And her theory is because most studies on human biology have been done under um, sterile lighting, she believes that when you replicate those studies under full spectrum light that we get from the sun,
Yeah.
the biological differences will be noticeable
Hmm.
in significant ways. So I think that's going to be dope over the next like 20 years, learning like, oh,
Dude.
wow, like the sunlight actually is massively important. And maybe these
Right.
issues that we thought were food issues are actually lack of sun issues. And
Dang.
yeah,
Well, it helps. We should definitely be doing more stuff outside
yeah, man,
and not
we
sitting
should.
in front of a gaming television or whatever,
Exactly,
doing our
dude.
thing.
And it reminds
Wow.
me of that like World Economic Forum guy when he's
Yeah,
being interviewed about how AI is basically going to make most people jobless, and he calls them useless feeders. He's like, the best we can do is probably give them video games and drugs to cope. And I'm like, video games and drugs are basically like they're affecting our brains in similar ways, one just more potently than the other.
exactly. Flip, dude. Well, we that's the key of internet has the knowledge,
Yep.
and we have to educate ourselves. Nobody's going to educate
Yeah,
us for us, you know?
exactly.
We have to put in the time and effort to listen to podcasts. And
Mhm.
oh man, if
Dude,
I just spend half the time I did scrolling on anything productive, I'd be doing so much.
dude,
So
it's true. I'm gonna start
that's,
texting you randomly, be like, get off the
yeah,
phone.
dude. Yeah, keep doing it. Get the phone, do 40 push-ups. Leave the
Yep.
phone.
Dude, honestly, I
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
I'll put a reminder in my phone or something. That'd be funny. But
Nice.
before we go, because I feel like I've talked most of this freaking
Oh,
podcast.
who cares, man? That's the point of this. Really having people on, the key is that it creates dialogue
Yep.
that brings out the truth, you know?
Yep.
So
Yep. That's true. That's true.
that could
And
be a slogan, right? It's like
amen.
dialogue that brings truth, you know?
Amen, Doc. But I wanted to kind of wrap up with you are also a coach of some sort. What would you
Yeah.
describe it as?
I would say it's like a life coach, but the the focus is getting unstuck. I think the years and years I've been stuck, stuck in pornography, like just feeling like I'm confused, like what's my purpose? Why am I on this earth?
Hmm.
Like even if I have a passion for life, like how do I utilize it and put it to use? Like the blocked memories that I had in my past and how much it hindered my future growth, my personal feelings towards emotions.
Hmm.
Uh, I just, I've seen so much life come from just allowing people to speak truth and to really be honest with themselves. And through that space, you're starting to realize, oh man, there's so much more to me, like who I thought I was and who I thought I wanted to be. It's still possible. It's still
Yeah.
inside of you. I think giving place for people to speak, helping them process emotions, helping them process past memories,
Hmm.
getting healing through like finding your triggers, realizing why you feel these triggers. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. Uh, that the things you're feeling, you are only in control of the things that have, you feel, you think, you hear, you see, and you're in full control of changing your life.
Hmm.
I think through spending a couple of sessions, anything from 4 sessions to 6 months, uh, you could see so much change.
Hmm.
Like recently, I just end with this saying, I guess a testimony of one of my clients. She started um, and she wanted to be married. She's 39, and she's like, nothing's working. I love music. I haven't put out music. And in 4 weeks, we went from that space to her releasing a song on Apple Music
Hmm.
and all streaming services. And now she's married. Like in a
Okay.
couple of months, she's married.
And
to an
if I remember
amazing guy.
correctly, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, part of it was that she wasn't even really getting out there,
Yeah.
right?
And it's such simple things that if people just have like a sounding board to be able to bounce off ideas and realize,
Hmm.
oh, these things that I've been thinking all along, they're not just my thoughts. That the Holy Spirit is speaking to you and he's giving you ideas all the time. You just have to get off of your ass and actually do something about it.
Hmm.
And I think she took everything that was said to heart and she put it to practice quickly. And you can only grow and change your life as quickly as you're willing to start working on it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's that's my passion in life is to see people transformed. Like I guess the Bible says, like it says, a renewing of your mind, but putting that into practice and saying, okay, I am now in control. What am I going to do about it?
Hmm.
And you can change from a week to 6 months, depending on how severe your
Yeah,
case is. If you're willing to put in the work, your life will be transformed. So
yeah.
yeah, it's basically life coaching.
So a lot of people hear the term life coach and they think it's frou-frou nonsense, but what you're basically
Right.
saying is like we're
Yeah.
going into some of your ruts, your patterns that you're stuck in, and
Right.
we're conversing through them so that you can get yourself out of those ruts. We're not only doing
Right.
that, but we're looking at like why are you acting this way? And
Right.
maybe we could get if we can get to the bottom of it, we
Right.
can move along. And then
Exactly.
also you're creating what would you say like you're giving them ideas and framework on how to like or even just
Exactly.
accountability on
Yeah,
do
it's
the
both.
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not willing to work harder than you're willing to work in yourself.
Mhm.
So my job is to allow you to talk, give you a space to really get some like green lights, like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then my job is to encourage you, push you towards those goals and dreams. And that I would not be a barrier to stop you. And even if you're triggered by the things that I have to say, that you know that I'm not going to react to you in the way that the people around you might react to you and be triggered by your rudeness or your frustrations or because I know at the end of the day, triggers are just like undealt with situations or even things that happen to you personally that you
Hmm.
didn't even realize was happening to you. But as you deep dive into these things, you find the memories, you find the spaces that the things that happen to you, you can finally deal with the root causes
Yeah.
of the issues and just cut it off. And you realize these things no longer have the pain attached to it like they used to.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
I've heard it said that triggers are basically just self-protective like devices that you created for a season of life that are no longer serving you. And
exactly.
a lot of times what happens is you feel triggered by something because somebody did something similar to what somebody else did to you way
Yeah,
back when. And even though the person
absolutely.
now doesn't mean what that other person meant, you immediately assume that they do, and so you go into the defensive.
Exactly.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
It's such simple changes and it seems so colossal in the moment. But once you realize what you're doing and why you're being triggered,
yep,
these things just no longer have the impact that it used to have. Same as pornography.
yep.
Exact like my big triggers was loneliness or boredom and this feeling of like I'm not doing anything with my life.
Hmm.
Like the first thing I did was jump to pornography because it's the one thing that got me out of that space. Obviously, it brought shame after, but
Yeah.
in that moment, I got out of my seat of pity.
Well,
And,
it
you
also
know,
gives you like like a release from the pain almost for a minute.
right.
Like for me,
Yeah.
it like the addiction had a lot to do with being like feeling alone and isolated or like completely misunderstood and
Yes. Yeah.
or like
An AIDS
unfulfilled.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Oh,
But yeah,
man.
man, like the thing about triggers is most of the time once you realize why you're triggered and like that it
Right.
actually had something to do with your past and not what the person's doing now, then all of a sudden
Exactly.
it breaks it sort of breaks the cycle and you can kind
It
of stop and
does.
go like, oh wait, I'm feeling defensive because of that and not because of what I'm
Right.
going through right now. And you're able to start
Right.
working through it. It's great, man. It's
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
emotional process of like healing from stuff is so huge,
Right.
man.
It's
And
incredible, dude.
it's why, we're able to have, the health in our relationships that we do now. Not to say that everything's perfect, but like I know me, I can look at, my relationship and a lot of people would be like, "Oh yeah, it's a new relationship, so it feels like you're in the,
Right.
and
The honeymoon period. Yeah.
yeah, they'll say that, and I know they'll say that, but like there's also this arrogance in me that goes like, no, I've dealt with enough stuff that I can promise you this is gonna last. I also know, like
Yeah.
Paul Coomer, the man that married us, like he straight up is like, yeah, you don't ever have to actually leave the honeymoon phase. Now, I've said this once
Yeah.
on social media, and people will be like, yeah, if only that were true. But like he's been married for years, man, like
For
so
yonks,
long.
dude. Oh
And
man.
their relationship is so healthy, their communication is
Yeah,
so healthy that, like, sure,
dude.
they've had their moments, man, but they are
Sure.
still so much in that quote unquote honeymoon phase. And
Yeah,
so
it's a
for
choice, dude.
for
It's a belief
me,
and a choice. That's
yeah,
all it is.
it is. And for me, but it's also having the tools to actually navigate relationships in a
Yeah,
real good way. And I want to interview him at some point, but like,
dude, what a
I,
guy.
I
Oh,
know. I want to, but like it makes me go like almost arrogantly like I don't have to leave this place the way that you did.
no,
And just because you're going to tell me it's not possible doesn't mean that I'm not going to believe that it is possible.
no.
I believe
And
wholeheartedly that it is possible because I've seen it
exactly.
done.
That's right. Because you have actual examples. I don't think this person is obviously triggered and they have no examples of people who have done it before.
Mhm.
It makes total sense. It's the same as like we can't hold unbelievers accountable to
True.
things that they don't choose to be accountable to.
That's true.
Like you have to buy in and you have to believe, otherwise it's just not gonna happen.
Yep.
It's all choices. Our whole
Yeah,
life,
man.
every day
Hmm.
is based on choices. So
Yeah,
it's a
dog.
beautiful thing, man.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So the takeaways are become emotionally healthy, work on
Yeah,
yourself, uh,
exactly.
quit porn,
Exactly.
like seek authenticity and
Right.
and the Lord will break you free from so much stuff if you're
Yes,
willing to put in the work,
absolutely.
man.
Seek out truth.
Yeah,
Seek
dog.
out real truth. It's beautiful, man.
Man,
Yeah, I'm excited.
I
Excited
love
for
it.
you, dude.
Thanks,
This is
man.
the beginning of something fun and
Mhm.
life-giving.
Yeah, dude. I'm
I can
stoked.
absolutely see this, like giving life to you, but anyone who's listening, there's always something that anyone can take from any podcast.
Yeah,
Who cares if it's Joe Rogan's like huge podcast or if it's the Joe Schmo around the corner?
exactly.
Someone has some life experience you don't, and
Exactly.
just
Yeah,
listen.
man. Yeah,
Yeah,
man. I'm excited, dude. I think I've said this in the last one I recorded, and I'll probably say it a bunch of other times to people on the podcast, and people listening will
yeah,
either get sick of it or they'll love it. But um, like I was feeling so strong that like it's time for me to start saying some of the things that are in my brain. On the
right,
one hand, it gives me the ability to actually articulate what I'm saying so that people don't
right.
misunderstand me the way that they do on Instagram. Because I'll post stuff
Yeah.
sometimes, people will be like, "The hell does he mean by that?" But then on the flip side, I've been feeling for years like the Lord kept saying, like, well, first he said, come back to the altar. And then I was like, okay, what does that look like? And he's sort of brought me back to the quote unquote altar. But at the same time, he's been processing me and getting me ready to like say the things that are burning in me. And
Wow.
I was like, how do I do that? And the idea was like, do a podcast, man. Start talking to people. Like, and instead of defending my own self on everything, I think bring on people that, are smarter than you that can, back up
Right.
some of your own claims. And so I'm like, all right,
Absolutely, right?
yeah,
It's
dude,
good,
dope, dude,
dude.
let's do it. And so
Exactly.
yeah, it gives me the opportunity to actually talk about the stuff that I'm passionate about. And whether people listen or not, like this was cool. Somebody I think our friend Justin from back in Ohio, he was talking, we were talking about like the idea of a podcast, and he was like, even with his, he was like, even if nobody really listens to it, it's cool to know that there's an archive of conversations that I've had with other people that my kids get to look back on and listen
Yeah,
to
it's powerful,
years
dude.
down the line and glean some amount of, something from. And
Absolutely.
that's
Or
dope.
even you go back and you're like, dang, like I was this person, like I shared these things. Like, man, I can learn from myself,
Yeah.
which we all do, you know?
And even if it
Yeah.
never comes to anything else, man, I feel like
Who cares? Yeah.
there's some people I
You're
know
being
that'll listen.
obedient, dude. I
Exactly.
agree. Exactly. And it's the same as my first podcast. It really hit home for a few people. And I really believe that it does. Like when the time comes, the right person will come
Yeah.
listen at the right space, you know? And I just want to say for anyone who is looking for coaching, if you can go on my website, www.honestlifecoaching or honestlifeconsulting.com.
Mhm.
And if you need help, man, I'll help you through it. I'll even give you a free consultation, and we can talk it through.
Heck yeah, dude.
Um, your life change starts now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Exciting, man.
And give us the podcast name again and any socials if
Yeah,
you want to put them out there.
yeah, dude. It's the Honest Life podcast. You can just look it up on Spotify or Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty much
beautiful.
much it.
Awesome. Well,
Awesome,
love you,
dude.
dude.
Love you, dude.
You're a legend.
You're the best. Thanks so much for making the time, man.
All
I
right, well,
appreciate you.
and everybody listening, thanks for listening. Do the likes and the subscribes and all the things that I'm supposed to
Yes,
tell you or
Lord.
whatever. And and we'll see you on the next one.
Yes, Lord.